Hello and welcome to another edition of the new Crossroads, a regular podcast sponsored by IceMiller. And it really is a regular look, a focus on the Internet of Things and how IoT is reshaping the economy in Indiana and beyond. My name is Gary Dick. I'm host of Inside Indiana Business. Pleased as always to be joined by Judy Oakenfuss. Judy is a managing partner at IceMiller. And we're also very pleased to have our very special guest this time around, someone who really doesn't need an introduction to the IoT crowd. Bill Soards is the president of AT&T Indiana. And Bill, as always, welcome.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Judy.
I'm going to start off the questioning with AT&T, your role with AT&T, and a focus. You've been so high profile, and so is the company, around the Internet of Things and the industry in Indiana. Talk about IoT and how you feel that's kind of reshaping what AT&T is doing, in particular here in Indiana.
Well, there's never been a better time to be in IoT, and you know everybody's at probably a different stage in their knowledge base about what IoT is, but obviously the Internet of Things. And you know, in the communications industry, we've been connecting people with the AT&T legacy for over 100 years with telephones. But in the wireless and the mobility space, for the last 30 years, people have been connecting with primarily three different kinds of devices: cell phones, laptops, and tablets. And so those are kind of the networks that we've engineered for the last 30 years in the wireless and in the cellular business. But increasingly, it's all about IoT. It's about the Internet of Things. Now we're entering into this whole new era of connecting machines and letting machines communicate with each other and with humans, obviously. But many of us, even in the industry, are still beginning to wrap our heads around just how huge this opportunity is. It's a titanic shift in connectivity and the innovation and the businesses and the technologies that this whole change over the next few years is going to make is sizable, and I think we're all still trying to wrap our heads around that.
And you're making, AT&T making a sizable investment into the Internet of Things. You've been and continue to be very visible around the IoT lab in Fishers, Launch Fishers. Talk about, in your view, the opportunity that Indiana has, in particular, why you feel it's positioned very well in the Internet of Things space.
I think it's huge for Indiana. I mean, you know, IoT is Internet of Things, but here locally we tend to think about the Indiana of Things. IoT is all about connecting the physical infrastructure. And in the Midwest, and especially in Indiana, our economy over the last 100 years is rooted in the physical economy. Making things, moving things, and growing things. I mean, that is the heart of our economy. And so if we are to continue to be successful and competitive in the future, it's pretty clear that the Internet of Things is going to revolutionize states and economies that are vested in the physical assets. And whether you are on a farm or in agriculture or in manufacturing, as we all know, the most manufacturing intensive state in America, or in transportation, the Crossroads of America, all three of those major economic sectors are very ripe in physical assets, which means they're ripe for Internet of Things disruption. And so the question becomes there's no question at all that these industries in Indiana will be utilizing this technology. The question is, do we have an opportunity to start developing and making some of that technology and not be relegated to just consumers of it?
Right. And as you talk about the make, move, and grow, and that's something we hear a lot about in Indiana when we're talking about connected devices. Just to help people understand, help really me understand, what emerging opportunities have you seen really in the agricultural, the logistics, the manufacturing areas?
I think they're tremendous. And again, because I think we're still in an emerging technology and an emerging trend, it tends to be the larger multinational companies that are hot and heavy into IoT today. But it's going to be the other medium-sized national businesses or smaller businesses that are quick to identify and capitalize on this opportunity that are going to be successful. And I think that's why so many of us are passionate about evangelizing and sharing this information with Hoosier businesses. But for AT&T, it's all about mobility. And so, I think IoT is going to have a lot of different applications. We probably wouldn't play as much in a manufacturing facility where all the assets are fixed and don't move. But we see our opportunity more with mobile assets or very remote assets. You might be able to connect machines on a floor of a factory with Wi-Fi or other IoT technologies that are really fixed. But for us, it's about things that move, vehicles, trucks, cargo, things that are being shipped all around the world. Maersk is one of our bigger multinational global corporations. They obviously ship hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of containers all around the world via land and via sea. And so that is, I think, a use case that is uniquely beneficial for cellular and satellite kinds of combination technologies. So we're a big connectivity player for IoT for Maersk, measuring not only where these assets are, but they want to know certain things about the contents of those containers, right? Temperature, vibration, things of that nature to help make sure not only the container itself is secure and we know where it is, but the contents thereof. And then in the agriculture space, there's not a combine or a tractor that rolls off the assembly line at John Deere that doesn't have an AT&T SIM card embedded in it. Much like vehicles today. We've been an early leader in smart vehicle connectivity. And so, today, at the end of 2017, almost 39 million devices are connected on the AT&T network. Not cell phones and iPads and so forth, but IoT devices. And of those 39 million, almost 18 million of them are vehicles. So every Ford, GM, Tesla, Saab, and Volkswagen, I think, and I'm probably missing a couple manufacturers, that roll off the assembly line have an AT&T SIM card embedded in them. So that in the vehicle experience, for the front seat, it's all about diagnostics and data that can be shared with the manufacturer or partners that they want to share that data with. And in the back seat, it's about entertainment, Wi-Fi and television and internet connectivity. But we see this space continuing to explode, and the opportunities and impacts for Hoosier businesses, whether you're making things, moving things, or growing things, is phenomenal.
Right. And when you're talking about vehicle connectivity, that is going to make me think about autonomous vehicles and everything I hear about autonomous vehicles. And is that part of when you're talking about vehicle connectivity, you're talking about AT&T's role in maybe helping us move towards autonomous vehicles?
I think that's a big part of the future. So today, our devices that are out there are connected are on a 4G LTE network, which the fastest network that's commercially available today, and maybe this is a good transition to begin to think about 5G. But for the last 5 or 6 years, global standards entities have been debating what 5G is going to look like, formal 5G. And those standards have just been agreed upon at the beginning of this year. The standards have now been passed on to the manufacturers. And so all of our partners that manufacture cellular radios, Ericsson and Nokia and so forth, are just now beginning to roll out those 5G radios. So it's largely believed that commercial deployments in the United States of true standards-based 5G will happen in the United States before the end of the year. We've said that we'll have 5G deployed in at least 12 U.S. cities by the end of this year. Prior to that, Gary, as you know, we launched a new network in July of last year, almost a year ago, our 5G Evolution network, which was really a half step towards formalized 5G networks. But Judy, I think to your point, the biggest benefit that 5G networks are going to bring, they're going to be a lot faster, right? They're going to be 100 times faster than a 4G LTE network.
Wow.
So on your device today, if you're able to get 20 megabits per second on your iPhone, 5G networks will have upwards of a gigabit, essentially wireless fiber to your thing that's connected. But even more transformational than just the speed is the latency. When you start envisioning technologies like autonomous vehicles, that vehicle is going to be sending and receiving data at latency rates that are, decimals, to the 0.00, extent. Because when you have a dog or a child or something dart in front of a vehicle, you sure don't want a whole lot of delay with that signal being processed in order to instruct that car. That's probably the most transformational aspect between 4G to 5G networks is the latency is just minimal.
But when you talk about connectivity, Bill, certainly it's an important ingredient as you talk about the evolution of IoT, and the connectivity can vary, different bandwidths, range, cost, reliability, all those kinds of factors. As companies look at their IoT investments, when it comes to connectivity, what are some of the things they should really consider?
I think it's about, where are the assets that I care about? Are they fixed? Are they mobile? And I think right there, that gives you a pretty good indication about what types of technologies you want to explore. If you have things that are mobile or in remote or hard to reach locations, you want to be thinking about cellular or satellite combination technologies. But if your assets are fixed, I think there's a plethora of other technologies that are being developed that are really good for fixed assets in a small or dense kind of location. But and certainly there's more technologies to come. There's a lot of companies that see this opportunity of IoT, and a lot of those things are being developed.
So I'm interested, as you say there's more technologies to come, are there more technologies in the connectivity world?
I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot right now. And as any nascent technology, people float things out there, and then developers and companies begin kind of gravitating towards some, and then joint standards are agreed to, and it's clear we're early on in that process.
So as we get new technologies for connectivity, I guess I'm sort of asking why. We have 5G, you just explained, greater speed, less latency. Obviously it's going to let different products be developed when you no longer have that waiting period. What more are we looking for? Why are we developing new connectivity reasons?
Well, I think it just depends on the business plan of the organization deploying it. If you're a cellular company like AT&T, Verizon, or many others, it's that 5G network that's going to make the most sense for you. But if you're a cable company or a company that doesn't provide mobile connectivity, then there's probably other technologies in your path that would better suit your business. So I think it's going to be a different path depending on the customer. Again, folks like Wabash National or Cummins with hundreds of thousands of assets that are mobile all around the country might want to go down one path, or a major manufacturer with a plant where all those assets are fixed might look at other kinds of technologies that might better suit them.
Now, certainly IoT transforming, disrupting many industries. Public safety is another area that IoT is having tremendous impact. FirstNet is the country's first nationwide public safety communications platform being built by AT&T in a partnership. The IoT Civic Hack that I thought was very interesting, got a lot of attention in April. AT&T really a big supporter and major driver of that. Talk about that Civic Hack and what it dealt with, and especially as it relates to public safety.
Sure, it was a fascinating event, and Ice Miller was a big sponsor of that too, so I have to thank Judy. FirstNet is the nation's very first public safety dedicated communications platform. It's really an outgrowth of the 9/11 Commission. The 9/11 Commission made a recommendation of about 24 different items they thought needed to be implemented, one of which, probably the most complicated and the most expensive, is the nation needs a completely dedicated communications network for first responders. After a huge federal RFP, that contract was awarded to AT&T about a year and a half ago. And so what this means now is we are building a separate wireless network alongside of our commercial network to support first responders, to make sure they have priority and preemption to be able to communicate when they need to. But it's also about bringing the first responders further upstream in the innovation cycle. I mean, today, public safety agencies have lots of different technology deployed in it. I mean, these folks like their gadgets, right? I mean, there are lots of different devices, from security to communications to monitoring to surveillance, drones, dash cams, license plate readers. They are a plethora of devices. But historically, they've pretty much been commercially developed. And so one thing that FirstNet envisions is bringing law enforcement and first responders alongside the developers of these technologies so that they can be purpose-built for those that have real-world experience in the field, along with those technology advocates. So in the public safety space, they like to not talk about IoT, they talk about IOSLT, the Internet of Life-Saving Things, IOLST.
Nice.
Yeah.
All the devices that I just mentioned that need to work under unique environmental concerns and reliability to the nines, and security. And so the the FirstNet hackathon that we had at the IoT lab in Fishers was fantastic. We had 600 plus people attend. And the beauty of it was about half of them were developers, software developers, engineers, entrepreneurs. But the other half were firefighters and EMTs and law enforcement officials and emergency management people and 911 operators. And so bringing that group of people together with the engineers and developers, neither of which know a whole lot about the other's kind of sphere of world that they live in. It was a 24-hour event to uncover new ideas and new products and new services. We're kind of wrestling with whether we bring that back again last year. People had so much fun. But it was a really good opportunity to explore this explosive world of IoT in a real public safety specific setting.
Well, speaking of the IoT Civic Hack, and it really was a very cool event, how did that translate into identifying maybe some of the talent that AT&T, and for that matter other companies, need to bring some of these technologies to life in terms of the talent that was on display there?
You know, we're going through an incredible transformation at AT&T as well, a company that's been around as long as ours. You have to continuously reinvent yourself or run the risk of being obsoleted, especially in the gig economy today where innovation-driven products are disrupting hundreds of traditional players. And historically, we're a pretty traditional player. But participating in hackathons and in meetups and all the kinds of innovative kind of things that are going on in central Indiana exposes us to new ways of thinking and disruption. It also helps familiarize developers and software companies with some of the platforms that we're building. We have a lot of tools available to help companies learn more about IoT and develop products that could run on our IoT network. And you know, with over 4,000 employees in Indiana, believe me, we get just as much benefit out of it as we hope the attendees that do.
So when you were talking about disruption just now, one thing that I see IoT, and you and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, is it disrupts the business model. We're talking about predictive analytics and the fact all of the data that's going to be generated, perhaps that's part of the reason we need the greater connectivity because of all of the data. But I'm sort of interested in your viewpoint on how predictive analytics and the data is going to change some of the business models and disrupt it.
You know, I see kind of two basic reasons why a company would want to get into and start exploring their IoT opportunity. One is to make the business more efficient, right? Where are my assets? How can I better efficiently manage those assets? You own a heating and air conditioning company and you've got a fleet of service technicians and you know where they need to go and when, and you want to be dispatching the person that's closest to us. So there's certainly business efficiencies that can be gleaned with IoT. The real opportunity is the data. We're moving into the data economy, and if you're not exploring how to gather and analyze and put into action data, your competitor is likely to be doing that. And so how can those companies, you know, we talked about Cummins Engine, how can they better make their motors more efficient? How might that heating and air conditioning company offer value-added services? You know, if they're able to analyze the data to know that air conditioner is experiencing anomalies and a proactive service call might just save you a couple $100 in the long run, that might be a service that a customer is willing to pay, you know, $4, $5, $9, $10 a month for, just for that comfort of knowing that Gary's going to come fix that air conditioner even before it breaks.
So now when I start taking into account the people, you know, in my mind, everyone's going to be using data, analyzing data, relying on IoT and greater connectivity. So when we sort of step back and try and help the business owners out there, the people who are going to be establishing new businesses, building new multi-use developments, anything, how do they take into account this greater use of data, this greater connectivity when they're now building? What do they need to be thinking about really in the infrastructure?
Well, it seems overwhelming, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when you take a traditional business, whatever it is, and you tell them about what this IoT opportunity is. But more and more there's these integrators, and you know, Clear Object is a great example in Fishers of companies that are helping other companies identify what this opportunity is and then explore how to begin to implement it. So I think all of that is just beginning to grow, but it's all about how you can take a business and make it more efficient today, identifying cost savings, and just help to educate them about the massive value that data is going to mean to their future business.
Well, and it would seem to me that the businesses in Indianapolis that have 5G have a distinct advantage over someone perhaps in another state without 5G. I mean, is that correct?
I think so. I mean, Indianapolis, interestingly enough, they're the best. Root Metrics is a third-party evaluator of wireless networks. And I think for the last 2 years in a row, 2 Indiana cities have made the top 10 nationwide for wireless networks, Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. And they evaluate speed and reliability and texting and data throughputs and call retention and all these kinds of things. And you ask yourself, why? Why are there 2 cities in Indiana that do that? I think a lot of it stems to the public policy, quite frankly. Indiana is a state that's been forward-looking on technology policy for well over a decade, beginning in the Daniels years and on through Governor Pence and Governor Holcomb. And so we've really outpunched our weight class in terms of investment and building both fiber and next-generation wireless networks all around the state. Sure, there's more to go, and there isn't a state in the country that hasn't tackled fiber to the home everywhere or 100% broadband availability. But policy, I think, has a lot to do with it. But yes, I mean, as we enter this new decade of economic development, where it's interesting to see the IEDC and even local economic development groups, the kinds of companies that they're talking to, sure, we're still looking for manufacturers and so forth, but they tend to be a lot more software driven, a lot more innovation focused businesses. And as fiber has become prevalent in almost every major metro area in the nation, I think our strategic advantage in Indianapolis and other parts of the state, Fort Wayne, is the strength and capabilities of our wireless networks, because those are the networks that empower employee mobility, driving efficiencies in the field, IoT, data collection. We have a strategic advantage in Indiana, and our wireless networks play a big role in that.
As we wrap up, Bill, what's next? What do you see as next? We talk about the 5G evolution and more speed and connectivity, but when it comes to things, next opportunities for Indiana, public policy that drives a lot of this. Your thoughts looking forward?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we literally have been on the cutting edge of any new emerging policy issue in Indiana for quite some time now. We're experiencing massive fiber deployments. We've been an early recipient of 5G or near 5G technologies, which positions us very well. We're really ahead of the curve as it relates to other states and communities from an infrastructure standpoint. Our Achilles heel, which is very well known, continues to be talent and capital and infrastructure. And we've doubled down and done really well on infrastructure. We're making progress, I think, on capital with the Next Level Fund and continuing to identify and attract more sources of venture capital in Indiana. Talent pipeline has just been that bugaboo with all the resources here in our backyard, but with the increasing number, the quantity and the quality of tech jobs that are coming, particularly in central Indiana, I think we're beginning to bend the curve on that talent issue. The most satisfying thing is when you go to job fair, recruiting fairs at IU, Purdue, Notre Dame, Butler, and so forth, and you begin to see more and more Indiana-based companies. That's when you're giving those kids an opportunity to stay here. So I think the future is very bright, and IoT is going to play a huge role in that.
Certainly a story to be continued. Bill Soards, the president of AT&T Indiana. Thanks very much for being a great guest, and importantly, thanks for all you do for IoT and the IoT industry in Indiana as well.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for this edition of the new Crossroads. My name is Gary Dick, and for my co-host Judy Okenfuss. Judy, thanks for being here as always. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next edition of the new Crossroads.